Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Data Science Hangout. I'm Rachel Dempsey. I lead customer marketing at Posit. Posit is the open source data science company building tools for the individual, team, and enterprise. I'm so happy to have you joining us here today. The Hangout is our open space to hear what's going on in the world of data across different industries, chat about data science leadership, and connect with others who are facing similar things as you. And we get together here every Thursday at the same time, same place. So if you're watching this as a YouTube recording in the future, there will be details to add it to your own calendar below. Just double check that it adds it for 12 Eastern time so that you can join us live. I am learning from the Hangout survey that people really enjoy connecting with other attendees through the chat here in Zoom. So if you are interested in connecting with others, I want to encourage you to say hello in the chat, introduce yourself, your role, where you're based. Feel free to share LinkedIn if you want, but also something you like to do for fun. We're all dedicated to keeping this a friendly and welcoming space for everyone and love to hear from you, no matter your years of experience, titles, industry, or languages that you work in. I always forget to add this part in the beginning, but if you're hiring, feel free to share any open roles that you have on your team in the chat here. That is not spammy at all to us. It's also 100% okay if you just want to listen in here or be a part of the party happening in the Zoom chat. But there's also 3 ways you can jump in and ask questions, which I'm sure Curtis will share in the chat too. But you can raise your hand on Zoom and I'll call on you to jump in. You could put questions in the Zoom chat and just put a little asterisk or star next to it if you want me to read it, if you're in a coffee shop or something. And then we also have the Slido link where you can ask questions anonymously too. But with all that, thank you so much for spending your Thursday with us. I'm so excited to be joined by my co-host today, Alex Freberg, founder of Analyst Builder and host of the YouTube channel, Alex the Analyst. And Alex, I'd love to kick things off with having you introduce yourself and share a little bit about Alex the Analyst and an Analyst Builder as well. But
Sure
also
thing.
something you like to do for fun too.
Something I do for fun. All right, I can definitely do that. I do things for fun every so often. Depends on the week or month. But my name's Alex Freberg. If you guys haven't seen my YouTube channel, go check it out. I just crossed 750,000 subscribers like 2 weeks ago, which is a big milestone. So I'm heading for the million, which is really exciting.
Congrats.
Thank you very much. And I teach everything about data analytics. I've been a data analyst for, almost 8 years now. And I don't have any background in data. Before that, I was in healthcare, and so I, worked. I worked at hospitals and ERs and rehabilitation centers as kind of like just a caretaker, or, different positions in that. And so it's very the world of data I was kind of thrust into by accident, and I fell in love with it and became obsessed with it. And so, yeah, Curtis put my YouTube channel down there. If you want to check it out, go for it. It's a great channel. I teach Excel, Python, Pandas, Tableau, Power BI, and I'm sure I'm forgetting some. And so that's what my YouTube channel is. And then I created a data analyst learning platform called Analyst Builder. And that just is kind of my full courses. And we have an integration of coding in there. And so you can code while you learn, which is, a really great way to learn. And so that's pretty cool. We launched it like last October, and I think we have about 35,000 users. And so it's grown pretty well. I'm really happy with it.
Awesome. And what about for fun?
Oh,
Well, maybe
yeah, I
that's
forgot
fun
about that.
too. Maybe that's
Fun
already
always
fun.
comes last. I recently just flew out to Dallas. My father-in-law he's retired, so now he just does music. He's a musician. He just does gigs, and so I play a lot of guitar just when I have like time in between stuff. And so I flew out there and we did a few gigs at some hotels and stuff like that. And I have videos of it, and I don't know if I'm going to share it on my Instagram or not, but I might. Because I play guitar on my like live streams on my YouTube channel, and people like it. But it's a bit, it's a bit different when you're actually really trying. There's people going to be watching and judging, and so I might share it though on my Instagram.
There are a lot of musicians in this group, and I always
That's
notice a
awesome.
bunch of guitars hanging in the back as
Yeah,
well.
yeah. Yeah, I've
I
been
think
playing
there's
guitar for
also
like
some game
10
kit.
years.
Nice. And I got to witness this in Charleston, actually.
That's right. That's right. I forgot. Yeah, when we were at the content creator meetup, I live in like right near Charleston, so I brought my guitar out, and one morning we were all eating breakfast and whatnot, and so I just played some guitar, and someone else next to me was singing. I can't remember who that was, but he was good. But it was a fun time. That was a good time. But yeah, yeah, that's what I do for fun for the most part.
Awesome. Well, some of us here might not necessarily be an influencer or planning to be a data content influencer, but I think a lot of us do actually want to influence people in our own organizations. And I
Oh
know
yeah.
there's a lot of people here who have maybe started an internal community within their companies to help teach others how to use Python or R. And I was just wondering, I would love to learn from you some tips that you would like to share with all of us.
Yeah, it's funny. I've actually done exactly that, which is I've introduced new tools to my team just when I was like a beginner. I was like my second year in, I found Python and I was like, what is this? What is this programming language? This is amazing. And I fell in love with Python and I was like, I got to figure out how I can use this in my job because it's so good. And so to that specifically, before I get into some tips, I I started like finding about automation. And I, again, was very new to this. And so I didn't know what it was. And so I started um, practicing it just on my personal computer. And I was like, I could do something like this for this project at work. So I went to my boss and I pitched it. I'm like, hey, Sabrina, I was like, we do this manual Excel stuff all the time. And it's this and this, and it's always the same. It's very manual. It takes too much time. I was like, how would you feel if I automated that? And she's like, I'm in. So then I built it. I built the whole thing. It took me like, an hour here, an hour there for maybe about a week it took, and it worked. And I showed it to her. I was like, it does all this work automatically through Python. And then, here's the output. And she was like blown away. And so I kind of got to introduce it by a use case, which was really neat. And it saved our team a lot of time. And she ended up having me show everyone else on the team how to do it because everyone did it. And so that was kind of how I introduced Python to my team who did not use Python at all. We weren't a Python team. And so I've done that many times over my career. I've introduced new tools, like we switched over from like on-prem to the cloud, or we switched from Tableau to Power BI. And I'm like, hey, listen, we got a good thing here, but let's look at this other tool. And so my tip is always just go for it. I've worked with a lot of people, like not in the workplace, but just talking to people like this, where I'll say, hey, you have there's a real use for this skill or this tool. I was like, you should just go and tell your boss and see what they say. If they say no, it's a terrible idea. Well, he's probably a bad boss. I was like, but if you have a good boss who's open to it, they'll at least let you try. And that's what you're hoping for. And so I think there are some bad managers out there, but if you have a good manager, just like a person, like a normal good human being, they'll give it a chance and they'll let you test it out or try it out as long as you're not like destroying something or you know doing something wrong. They're going to give you a chance. And so I always just say go for it. Just see if they'd be willing to let you try.
And how did you promote that example across the organization and show it to other people?
My team had a lot of visibility. We were on data collection. And so we had our hand in a lot of different pots with a lot of different teams. And so my boss, Sabrina, was just really she was super outgoing, was not technical at all. She wasn't a technical manager, she was a people manager. And so when I started showing her this, she was like, we got to show everyone else. And so she's friends with all the other bosses and like managers and VP and everything. And so she was like, hey guys. So we did daily stand-ups. And so like one of the daily stand-ups, she was like, hey guys, Alex built this thing. He's going to demo it. And I want you guys to use it if you think it's applicable. Um, and so I just demoed it really quick. And people were like, oh my gosh, why haven't we been doing this for the past 4 years or 5 years? But I was new to the team. I had only been in that role for about 6 months. And so I was kind of a new guy on the block. I was trying to prove myself early on in my career. And so, everyone else had kind of just been doing the same thing for a long time. And I came in with these new ideas and they really liked it. And so I think having good connections to promote it is really important. I started to find that in my career as I started kind of climbing the corporate ladder, that making connections with people became really important to get my job done. And even more so as I had more visibility in bigger projects that cost more money, you had to have connections to get things done. And so those connections are really, really important.
Absolutely. I see, sorry, I can't see your first name in the chat, but our Naya Tariki, you had a question in the chat. Do you want to jump in? And I can read it. And do you want to add more context? But it was somebody saying, I love your tutorials very much, and a request for some shiny content.
Funny you mentioned that. I'm actually working with Curtis and Joe, and I'm sure I'll work with others along the way. But I'm making a whole Shiny series, which is really Shiny Express to be specific. But I'm also going to be making some Quarto videos as well. I love it. I've been diving into them like really a ton the past couple days, but I've known about it before that. But now that I'm like really diving into, I'm like, this is really great. I'm excited to make these. And so, yeah, I'll have a whole series on that probably next month. They'll probably be out. I'll finalize everything and record it and put it in the lineup, and probably next month it'll be out.
That's awesome. What's been most exciting to you getting to try them out?
So what's neat about things like Shiny and Quarto is, one, you get to build a user interface. And in a lot of data analyst work, that stuff is not anything you do. You don't get to touch on that. You mostly work with something like Tableau, or maybe you know, there's 100 different tools for data visualization, but most of them have UIs that you just drag and drop. Which is not a bad thing at all. But then if you want to build some type of web-based application, there are ones that have embeddings, but they're not, in my opinion, not a lot of them are very good. And so you typically have to do some customization. I'm familiar with Streamlit just because of other data science people. And so I had started with Streamlit, and Streamlit's really good. And so I like trying new tools, and I was like, I really want to try Shiny. This seems like a great tool. And as I'm getting into it, there's just especially Streamlit, or sorry, not Streamlit, especially Shiny Express is very user friendly, which again, when I make tutorials, I don't try to go crazy in depth, because I know my audience may not be, they may not know CSS or HTML or, different web-based building tools or ways to make things. And so, I've really been enjoying Shiny Express because it's really simple to say, hey, I want a slider here. I want this visualization here, render it here. It makes it pretty easy, but you also feel like a boss because you're just like, I am stinking coding right now and I look awesome. And so when you get all the pieces to connect, like it's just it's a great feeling as a non-web developer to be able to do that stuff. Because I'm just a data analyst who uses Python. But because I like Python so much, Shiny really hits home with me.
I love it. Thank you. Well, Alan, I see you just put a question into the chat. Do you want to jump in?
Sure. Yeah. Hi, Alex. I'm just really curious about kind of your journey from there to here. There had to be some point where you said, "Oh, I really like this educational, this technical, whatever." And you must have had a bunch of new stuff to learn in like, how do I make a tutorial? How does video work? Just curious about like, how did you make that pivot for yourself, and what's that process been like?
Yeah, that's a great question. I had never made, actually, that's not true. I made one YouTube video. Oh, whoa, actually, I'm going way too far back. Um, I did have a YouTube channel before Alex the Analyst. I totally forgot about this. It was a watch review channel. And I used my iPhone 6S, and it's not this one, but I would just hold it up while I was recording, and I would talk about a watch. Or I'd set it on a pile of books and I would do that. And I liked reviewing the watches, but I didn't have enough money at the time to buy enough watches to keep that channel alive. And I realized that pretty early on. I was like, wait a second, I forgot I'm broke. This isn't good. So I was like, so I stopped that channel. A couple months later, I was like, I really liked making videos and I really have been getting into Python. So let me see how I could make like some Python videos. And I was gonna name it Python with Alex, I think is my channel I was gonna make. So I was only gonna make Python videos. I was like, I don't know how long that would last, maybe like a year before I ran out of content. So I decided data analytics. So the process really was a ton of research on YouTube about how to screen record on like a budget, how to edit on a budget. And when I was breaking into data analytics, I took a ton of courses, mostly on Udemy and Coursera. And so I had a pretty good idea of how people made the videos or how to structure them. And so I just tried to make them as useful as I possibly could. And some of my earlier videos were not as good as I had hoped, but it's all iterative. As I go on, I get better audio, I get better, screen capture and all those things. It is funny because my dad's a teacher of 30 years, and he's actually the principal of my kids now at his school. And I never thought I'd go into education or teaching in any way, but now we kind of laugh about it because I came back to it in the end. Now, I quit my job. I was a manager of data analytics for a Fortune 10 company back at the end of 2022. I quit my job to do consulting and then my YouTube stuff full time. And so I made that decision because one, my full-time job, I was not enjoying that much. The pay was great, but it just was not as technical as I was hoping. It was more people managing. And I learned after I took that role that I really need to be building something to keep myself engaged. My wife is convinced I have ADHD, and she diagnoses those types of things, so she would know. So I'm convinced that all these things kind of played into the fact that I have a really good attention for detail and kind of outlining everything, and then I have this desire to keep building and keep learning. And so along the way, I learned a ton. Most of the videos that you see online, not all of them, or most of the videos on my YouTube channel, maybe half of the tutorials are things that I learned, within the past year. And so it's not like I'm a mega expert in all of it when I recorded it. Like things in Python, as I was learning, I would be like, well, this is super cool. I need to make a video on this. Like I learned this last week and now I'm teaching others how to do it. And so it was very go with the flow and very just I took it all as a learning process, and I'm still learning today. I just recorded a video and I messed up some audio and whatnot, so I'm still learning. But yeah, that's kind of how I don't know if that answered your question entirely, but that's how I got into it. It's how I kind of started really getting into it.
Yeah, thanks. That's a great answer. It's a really interesting path. Thanks.
Yes, I agree. None of my friends, I have a bunch of friends who knew me since 4th grade. We're still very close, and whenever we meet up, because they live up in North Carolina, whenever we meet up, they're always like, this guy? Like this guy became like a YouTuber out of all of us? And I'm like, listen, I was like, I didn't choose this life. It chose me. So, I kind of just go with the flow, and I never expected to be where I am, but here I am.
Right on.
What do you think your friends thought you would do?
Well, everybody thought I was going to be a doctor or a lawyer, because I did very well in high school, did very well in college. And I got into the pre-med program at my college, which was pretty tough. And then when I got this internship at an ER, I just had some bad experiences with blood and other things. And I was like, I can't do this. I was like, this is not my calling. I'm never doing this. So then I got into like the therapy realm. After I got out of college, everyone was like, oh, okay, Alex is going to be like a counselor or a therapist or something like that. which is the path I was going down. And then I started like just completely changing everything, and they're like freaking out. They're like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "I don't know." But yeah, they all thought I was going to be either a doctor or a lawyer. And it's funny because now two of my friends, one of them is a doctor, one's a lawyer.
Laura, I see you had a great question in the chat a little bit earlier. You want to jump in?
Yeah, sure. Oh, did I freeze? Oh, there we go. So how is it that you learned? Because obviously you have to know way more about something in order to teach the small part of it. And like kind of a mini follow-up on that is when you're learning, how are you learning to be a better teacher at the same time as you're teaching things? Just curious about your process.
All right, so the first one was, oh geez. Can you say that again? Because I heard it, but then I tried to listen to the second question and forgot it.
Camera's jumping around. How do you like, where do you learn from? Do you like
Gotcha.
O'Reilly books or other YouTubers, or just someone said a weird thing on Threads, I'm gonna dive headfirst into this?
Okay, yeah, let me answer that one and then the second question. So the first one is, I mostly, when I was first starting out, learned through like Udemy. And YouTube. I was very, very, very broke when I started becoming a data analyst. I had $500 maybe to my name. And I just gotten married to my wife. She took a big risk on me. And I was taking Udemy courses in YouTube, and that's how I get most of my content when I was first starting. As I progressed, maybe past my first year as a data analyst, maybe my second, I did most of my learning hands-on through in my job. And what was really great about my progression in my career was that I started only with Excel and SQL. That's all we did. But the SQL that we did in that job was way beyond what I should have been doing. So I was doing a lot of like really complex store procedures, and it was just trial by fire. And my boss was really hands-on and had a good mentor. So I learned SQL super well, specifically Microsoft SQL Server. I learned that like really, really well that first year. Second year, we then started using Tableau, and I got some good hands-on experience with Tableau. My next job, we learned Power BI and Azure. And so I'm like picking up these skills as I'm going, and just I personally believe that I was a bit overestimating my abilities, because I would I would volunteer for big projects. I'm like, I can do that. And I had no idea what I was doing. But then I learned, I forced myself to like really dig into like the really technical details of a skill. And I had to learn it because I told them I could do it. So that's how I personally learned. I don't think I've ever read a data book before. Nor do I recommend them. Not that I don't recommend, nor have I ever talked about recommending them, because I just don't read that much. I'm like a very, very, very visual learner. And then what was the second question again? Now I'm forgetting everything.
Oh, that's all right. Yeah, you're kind of on spotlight here in front of everybody. I've done this, and you kind of forget your words sometimes.
Yeah.
Totally understandable. When you're learning things, how do you put on your hat of I'm learning a subject, but also I'm going to teach this subject? So what do you
Right.
learn about teaching being a learner?
Right. Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. I used to have to intentionally do it. Now I just subconsciously do it because that's what I do. I make YouTube videos. But when I was first starting out, when I was learning and started making videos, what I ended up doing is I went from beginner all the way to as advanced as I felt I could get. And then I would go back and be like, okay, this beginning stuff was really tough because I didn't understand this. So I need to make these connections. So I would write out like almost like a diagram of, here's how I got to that end project or that end result. And let me write out like the steps that I need to in order to teach it, so that they understand that this is connected to this, even though they don't really know that yet, in a really beginner level friendly way that I wish the person who I was learning from had done it. So I kind of like, when I'm watching like YouTube videos, now I do it really subconscious, or if I'm, learning a new skill, I do it subconsciously, but I kind of critique, I'm like, man, it would have been great if they had taught that before. And then I just remember it for when I'm going to teach it. And then I still do outlines for all my videos, but they're not as in-depth as they used to be, because now I just remember it. But the outlines are very helpful for me. And so, yeah, that's probably all I got for that one.
Thank you. And I mean, talking about how you learn right now is bringing back flashbacks to my first conversation with you ever, when you were telling me about like your first data analyst job, and how I think it was SQL that somebody asked about, and like immediately went home and researched it. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. That's a great story. And I was very embarrassed. Looking back, I should have known this. But my first data job was at a nonprofit. I was a data collection specialist and analyst. The lady who had been there for 20 years decided to retire. And so I'm like, I could do that. Like, let me apply. And so I got the job. It's only in Excel. We just collected data for grants in Excel. We would report it. That's all we did. So we decided to migrate to Salesforce and use their like ERM software. And is it ERM? I think I can't remember the acronym.
Yeah,
But maybe I'm
lots of acronyms.
nuts. Yeah, acronym I can't. It was a while, but they had some software that we were using in Salesforce. CRM. I think I was trying to think of CRM. Yeah, EMR is like electronic. Wait. No,
Medical
acronyms are throwing me off. I was thinking of some like healthcare term. Anyways, so we bring in this consultant to help us migrate our Excel data into the cloud and set up some automations, or not the cloud, but Salesforce, set up some automations for data collection. And he's like, "Oh, you're the data guy." I was like, "Yeah." So I was working, with him, and it had been a couple weeks, and eventually he asked me. It was like late in the afternoon. He asked me, he's like, "So you're the data guy. We need to, bring your data from SQL into the CRM." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" I was like, "You mean Excel?" He's like, "No, SQL." I was like, "What is SQL? What are you talking about?" I didn't say it like that, but I was like, "Oh, what is this SQL you speak of?" And he's like, "You don't know what SQL is?" I'm like, "No." And he's like, he had been a consultant for like 20 years, so he probably knew it like the back of his hand. And he's like, "Oh, well, it's this, SQL is like a database, and you store the data in it, and then you can query the data." And I was like blown away. He's like, "You guys have a SQL database. Someone showed it to me." Someone else besides me had access to the SQL database I had no idea about. So that night I went home and I looked up what SQL was, and I was like, "Wait a second, I got to learn this." Because I was like, I could see myself doing data stuff. It's pretty interesting. And so that night I bought a Udemy course. It was for SQL Server. I made a video about it a long, long, long time ago, about 4 years ago. And that, like, over the next 2 or 3 weeks, I just obsessed. Every single night for 3 or 4 hours, I was going home and learning SQL, and then going to work and being like, "All right, give me access to everything. I need everything." And I like became really semi-obsessive. It was like anytime I could get my hands on time to learn, even at work, like if I had a second, I would start, learning more. And so that was the first time I had heard what SQL was, and it turned out to be one of the most important skills of my career. So I owe a lot to that guy. I don't remember his name, but that consultant that came in, I owe a lot to him because he definitely helped me out a lot.
I love that. Thank you. I see Russ asked a question a little bit earlier, and there was an anonymous one that kind of touched on this too. But it was roughly, how much time do you spend per week making your videos? Is there a pattern to your time? Do you always record on the same day, for example?
Not anymore. But earlier on in my career, when I had a full-time job, I had little babies. My kids are a little bit older now, so it's a lot easier. But when I used to only have 2 hours Wednesday nights, and that's it, to record, edit, publish, create the thumbnail. That's all the time I had. Like, I didn't have any other time in my life to do it. And so I used to do it every single week at that exact time. Now, I work for myself, so I run my consulting company, and then I have Analyst Builder and I have my YouTube stuff. So now I kind of make my own schedule. But here's kind of typically how it goes. The videos that you see on my YouTube channel are usually made like a month or two before. So right now, I have 4 videos that are scheduled for the next 4 Tuesdays. So I won't be working on any videos for probably another month, because it's 1 per week. So 4 videos is 1 month's worth. Then what I do is I work at nights now. So like from 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. one night, I start, all right, let's think of my next videos. I do all the outlines, I prepare everything. And then the next day, for maybe a day to 3 days, depending on how many videos I'm recording, I only record just for like 7 hours straight. And so then I do about 7 hours of recording, and I can usually get maybe 5 to 10 videos done, which is about a month to 2.5 months of content, which then I can just organize it all, get it all scheduled, and then I have time to do all my consulting. I create full courses, which is through Analyst Builder. And so then I try to just bulk. I try to bulk my life a lot of times with, especially with YouTube. And yeah, that's how I do most of it. And then all the other stuff is just as it comes, new work with consulting, new courses I want to make. I just make them as I go.
Thank you. I guess kind of on this topic as well, Richard, I saw you had a question about like tips for creating some of those videos. Richard, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, for sure. So I've met a lot of people who kind of wanted to get into data, but they really struggle with learning coding. I started making some TikToks of Tidy Tuesday data sets. What I'm struggling with is like, how do you condense a lot of technical stuff? Because who's going to watch an hour-long thing of me walking through Tidy Tuesday into like 60 seconds and make it really engaging, not too technical? So I don't know if you have any experience with shorter content where you just get people excited about kind of diving in deeper.
Yeah. That's a great question. I actually am on the TikToks. I'm with the young crowd. I'm hip, I'm jive. I don't post on it that much, if I'm being honest. I have maybe like 20 videos, but I post on Instagram. The short content is really tough for me. If I'm being honest, it's very, very tough. I'm extremely long-winded. I like to get super technical. And if you watch some of my more advanced videos, what I'll do is I'll say, here's how you do it, but here's how it's actually implemented. And then I dive even more into it, and it's a problem. So what I traditionally try to do with most of my videos is I try to dive right into it. I don't talk, there's some YouTubers, and that's their thing, is they like to talk about, here's what it is, here's how you use it, here's before showing anything, they're just talking. Me, I just like to say, hey, welcome to my video. Here's what we're talking about today. Let's jump into it. And then I'm like, here's how we're going to implement it. For really short content, I've found that a lot of people who are successful, not me, but a lot of people who are successful with the short content is they show the final product first. They say, here's what we're building. Let's see how to build it. And then they'll cut right to the beginning. They say, let's take this, we transform it, we build this, we do this, and here's your final product. Depends on how technical you want to get in a short 60-second or a really short format, or how much you can fit into that short time frame. But I think that's a pretty good approach. And then, it's all about iteration. You're not going to get anything perfect right away. So, you make one and people will comment and they'll be like, this is pretty good, but could you show this next time? And you're like, oh, okay, maybe I should do that. I learn a lot from comments on my videos, people who are like, I like this, I don't like this, and stuff like that. And so feedback from your audience is also really good.
How do you handle feedback from so many people? Like,
oh, geez.
Yeah.
This actually wasn't an issue until I hit maybe like 600,000 subscribers or so. And before that, all I ever saw, like every video that I have is like 99.9% like rate. So like it's overwhelmingly positive. As you start getting bigger, I have found that people start having higher expectations. They're like, you have 750,000. Why don't you have a series on Shiny yet? No, I'm not dogging the person who asked that. I was just joking. But they'll ask me things. They're like, dude, why don't you have a series on R yet? Like, we need an R series. And they start getting mad at me. They'll send me messages. And I'm like, hey man, I'm just one guy who makes cool videos on YouTube. Like, I can't do everything today. I've made like 300 videos now that have spanned 4.5 years almost. So it's a long time. And I was like, I'll get to R. I'll get to R, I promise, but there's other R videos. And so the other day, it wasn't even it wasn't a tutorial, it was just a LinkedIn thing. And people were sending me messages like, hey, that's not cool. And they're like, because you're not, including people who couldn't get jobs. Because I posted about getting jobs. I'm like, yeah, the job market's tough, but this person did it. I'm like really proud of you. Congrats. And they're like, you're not being nice to people who haven't landed a job. And I'm like, guys, I'm just trying to say a good thing about someone. And so I found as I've gotten larger, a wider range of people all have expectations, and you can't please everybody. And so I don't even try. I don't really tiptoe around anything. I just block almost all the negative stuff out. If I see some genuine criticism that's like, hey, Alex, in your video, the audio wasn't very good. And I'm like, oh, you're right. That's really true. Or, hey, Alex, when you were teaching this, you didn't talk about foreign keys versus primary keys. And I'm like, oh, you know what? Hey, you're right. I should have added that. I'll add that in my next video. And so there's some genuine criticism, and then there's like what I deem as haters. And I just block out the haters genuinely. And I do have some, which is really neat. I mean, I've gotten big enough to have haters now, which never happened for the first 4 years. And so I'm just honored that I have a channel worth hating.
So funny. Well, I do think it's so cool that in some of these videos you're like learning out loud. Like you mentioned, you learned something a week before, and then
Yeah.
and how did you do that from the beginning, or how did you get comfortable with that?
No, in the beginning, I stuck with the tried and true. When I first started making videos, it was like how to help people become data analysts. I was like, there weren't many data YouTubers back in the day. Now there are a dime a dozen. There's thousands of them out there. But there was maybe 20 of us, 30 of us that were doing it, maybe more, but there were like companies doing it. Whereas like individual creators like myself, there weren't many that had made actual good content. And so I was like, when I was starting out, SQL they weren't great. I wish they had done it this way. So I decided to make those. And now I'm forgetting where I was going with that. What was the question again?
Well, I guess I'm just thinking about like when we talk with people in this community, sometimes it's hard to get people to present on new topics. And so I was just wondering if there's something we can learn from you about how you've gotten comfortable like learning something one week and then a week later presenting on it.
Yeah, so I remember where I was going now. Is I started with SQL because I knew SQL really well. And so I started with things I was like, I really know this skill enough to where I feel like it's hard for me to mess it up. I'm not going to forget what the where statement does or the where clause does in SQL, like those details. Now, as I started venturing into things like Python, I was learning a lot of Python and teaching Python on my YouTube channel as I was learning it. Like as I was learning web scraping, I was teaching web scraping probably the next 2 weeks. More of it was just from like a holy crap, like this is amazing. I was like, I got to show people this. I wonder if people even know about like web scraping because I was so new to it. So I got like super giddy about it. Like I got really excited. I was like, man, I want to show people this. And so I would build something and then I would show them how to build it. And I didn't really worry too much about failing because in my videos, I like to show my failures. I think people have really liked that. I didn't intentionally do that at the beginning. I just left it in there because I'm like, yeah, it's part of the process. But now that I know how much people appreciate it, I leave it in there on purpose. But if I'm doing something and I get an error, I'm like, oh, let's see how to debug this because they're going to encounter those exact same bugs and errors and, whatever. And so I don't strive for perfection. I just strive for something that is helpful. And I think a lot of people strive to make it as clean and neat, as perfect as possible. And I don't usually try or never have tried to do that. I just try to make it useful for someone who's learning it for the first time.
Definitely. Javier, I see you had a question a bit earlier on becoming an entrepreneur. Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. And Alex, this is great. I love your content, by the way. I'm more of an R user, but I've been following you for years, so I really
I'll make some more stuff. Don't hate me, all right?
no.
I promise I'll make it.
My my question was more like, I think what you're doing really appeals to a lot of people. Like I kind of dream of being a consultant sometimes, more so than like, I mean, I love education and I guess like the passion in showing other people how to do stuff, but like I really do think being a consultant one day, like my own consultant would be amazing. But I have this fear of not being able to replace my income.
Right.
And so I'm just curious, like, if you had a plan or if you gave yourself some kind of runway to get your, entrepreneurial business growing.
Yeah. Yeah. So one thing I'll say before I dive into my own stuff is I have a good friend, and you may know him. He's a YouTuber as well. His name is Seattle Data Guy. Well, his channel is called Seattle Data Guy. He does data engineering. And I've met him in person many times. Just an amazing guy. He talks a lot on his YouTube channel, as well as he has a whole course on how to start a data consulting company, which him and I both do. And so we jump on calls like once a month, every so often, just to catch up about business and YouTube. And, we're friends now. And so I would really recommend checking out his channel because it's very, very good. And he posts a lot about consulting and starting consulting stuff on LinkedIn as well. So just a plug for him. Yeah, in the chat, Seattle Data, awesome guy. So to give you some background into how I got into it, and then I'll kind of talk about what I would do over and how I would do it, is way back when I was actually about to get promoted to a manager of analytics role, I had a job offer from KPMG, which is a big consulting company, and as a senior data analyst. And my father-in-law
I was actually at KPMG, so I know exactly what you're talking about.
What'd you say?
I think Hunter said he worked there too at KPMG.
Oh, you work at KPMG?
I used to work there. Yeah.
Okay, so my father.
I did in the past. Yeah. Sorry, I think my internet is slow. My bad.
That's okay. My father-in-law worked for KPMG for like 20 years. He was a big time guy over there, and he did awesome. And because of that, I was like, well, I think I could get into consulting. I think I'd be pretty good at it. It's, good money. It's a lot of hours, but so I started applying without telling him because I didn't want any nepotism or anything like that, because he probably could have pulled some strings, but that wasn't what I wanted to do. So I got a job offer, and then I went to him afterwards and talked to him about it, like, hey, I got this job offer from KPMG. What do you think? And he's like, don't do it. He's like, you have a family, you have kids, you're a family man. He's like, you would hate it. So I didn't do that. I decided to go for the manager role. Just some background, which is probably true. I probably wouldn't have liked it as much as I had imagined. So I took the manager role, and on the side, as my YouTube channel had gotten bigger, I had started getting messages from people saying, hey, we saw you made this video on whatever, and we're trying to integrate Power BI into our tech stack, but we're having issues with it. Well, that's literally what I did, is I would help people get Power BI up and running in my company for part of my work. And so I was like, oh, yeah, okay, I could do that. And they're like, we'll pay you. I was like, whoa, hold up. You're going to pay me for this? Hadn't even crossed my mind. So I started taking on these little gigs here and there. And as my YouTube channel got bigger, more messages started coming in. And I was like, wait a second. I was like, this is making good money. It's pretty consistent. And I'm almost replacing my manager salary with my other stuff, and I'm only doing that on the weekends. So let me see if maybe I should ramp that up a little bit. So I started ramping it up, but then I was like, my full-time job is getting in my way from taking on more clients, which would make me more money. So I was like, I'm just going to quit and do consulting. And so that's what I did back in December of 2022. So like a year and a half ago. And so I made a lot of mistakes along the way. Just every mistake in the book: underpricing, overpricing, taking on too many clients, taking on too few clients, taking on work I didn't fully know, taking on work I knew too well, and it took me like an hour to do that I charged too much for. I made every mistake. And so looking back, I have gotten a really good groove, really good pricing structure and all these different things. And if I was just starting out today, there's a lot of different paths you can take. I personally think that if you are wanting to dive into it right away, trying to grow like a following like I did, or even a following at all, is very, very tough. I think that's more time consuming than just diving into it. And so a lot of people will be like, well, you have to have like a brand and you have to have like an online, face to it. I don't think that's fully true. I think it's good to have like something on your LinkedIn profile that says you work for your own company or something, but you don't have to do that. But what you can do is you can start small. If you are already working in the data world, you probably know data people or connections. And so, reaching out to those people and say, hey, I'm starting my own stuff. I'm working on these 3 specific things that I'm an expert at. If you need any consulting, let me know. You can make a post about it, whatever. But try to get that one client. Because I found that as I started getting clients, I just stopped having to get new clients after a while because the clients that I've had just keep coming back. So that one of my first clients I ever had was this startup company who wanted me to come in and help them migrate to Azure. Well, that one client, I've been working with them for like 2 years. And so that once you start getting them, usually it's good. The getting them and acquiring them is difficult. So there's a lot of cold outreach. There can be a lot of emailing. You could even go on things like Upwork or Fiverr and stuff like that to bid for jobs and things like that, which that's advice from like my friend Ben. That's not really my experience because I just had a different experience. But if you get some of these solid jobs and solid freelancing and consulting stuff, it's all snowballs. So then you do your best to leave a really good impression and bring them back as a repeat client. Once you get 3 or 4, it's mostly word of mouth. You say, hey, if you guys find me another client, I'll give you a 20% discount on all future work or something like that. And it's all a snowball effect. The other piece to it is you can't really just quit your job and do that, or I don't recommend it. And I've had people ask me if they should do it, and I was like, dude, don't do that. That's a terrible plan. Because
Yeah, I feel like I just don't have the time or
Right.
like the mental capacity after a work day to
Yeah.
do that kind of stuff. I'm just burnt out,
Yeah.
So when I think of like taking on side projects while I have a job, it's just like I'm actually not interested,
Yeah. I
Yeah.
100% understand that. I promise you, like I 100% have been there. How do I say this without my former employee hating me? I would take on projects without the time, and I would do my work at work fast, and then I would do my consulting work during work hours. Sometimes, not always, wink, wink. That is just the reality of it. Is sometimes I would have slower days than others, and I would work on other work during work hours. Like I just had to do it to get the work done. I it works for some people. Other people's jobs, they're like on it. So that's what I did though, to not feel crazy burnt out, because again, I've been exactly in that same place where I've overbooked myself and I hate it. Like I just can't do that. It's terrible. I feel overworked. I feel exhausted, and I'm just like, I feel like I'm not myself, and that's not fun.
Thank you. Appreciate all the advice. And do you have a favorite watch? Just curious.
I'm actually wearing my favorite watch right now. I'll take it off to show you. So this is an homage, if you want to call it that. But it's about this. It's a micro brand called To Sell, and so I'll hold it up right here. It is almost a direct ripoff of Rolex, but it was like $400, and it has sapphire crystal. It has a ceramic bezel, and then it has 3 16L stainless steel, and it is built like a tank. I could not find, even up until like maybe the next best watch was like probably $1,000. This watch was like $350, and I bought it for myself when I became a manager. When I got my manager role, I bought it for myself as a gift. And so that's my favorite watch. But I have many. I have like maybe 6 or 7, and I haven't bought any recently. But this one's my favorite for sure.
That's awesome. All right,
I'll
thanks.
make a clip of that for you, Alex, for your watch YouTube channel.
I need to come back and just start doing my watch YouTube channel again, just out of nowhere.
Azuka, I see you had a question on the consultant piece, and I just wanted to make sure that that covered part of your question too, or if you have a follow-up as well.
No follow-up questions. Thank you.
Okay. I see, Bill, you had a few questions, but one I see from a little bit earlier was, of your consulting gigs, what % are building things with open source versus like Tableau or Power BI? Also, have you approached and been asked if you know how to train folks in LLM stuff?
No, I haven't trained anybody in any LLM stuff. I do a lot of trainings, actually. I've been doing a lot of Power BI trainings. Yeah, I think that might be the only trainings that I've been doing recently is Power BI. A lot of companies or smaller startups and whatnot are wanting to use Power BI, but they just aren't good at it. And so they're like, hey, why don't you come in and do like a one-on-one training? So I do. My consulting work is also really eclectic. I do just about anything. With that being said, because I have a client base, and I get so many people, I probably this morning I got 2 more people messaging me for other work. I get to pick and choose what I get to do, which is pretty unique. And so I really only now choose stuff that I like to do. And so I actually consult quite a bit with companies on how to integrate AI. So I've just been doing a lot of AI stuff. And what's funny is I'll get in there and they're like, how can we integrate AI? And I'm like, you guys don't need AI. I was like, this is a bad idea. And in fact, I think it's going to really slow you down. And here's why. And then I explained it to them, and like they 100% agree. And so some companies have use cases for AI where it makes sense, and there's certain tools that they can integrate. But a lot of companies, I've been consulting with a lot of AI stuff. I also do a lot of building. So like I've been working with 2 startups on migrating to Azure, which is literally exactly what I did in my manager role. I came in and did something in a year, which they've been trying to get done for 6 years. They had been fighting and bickering and arguing about how to implement Azure and how to transfer into the cloud. I came in and I was like, guys, we're doing it. Let's get this budget approved. Let's get everyone on board. I worked my butt off to get that approved. And so then we started building it. I hired engineers and developers, and it was awesome. And then once we got it migrated over, I quit. And so I don't know what happened after that, but I do a lot of Azure stuff as well because I have a really good hands-on experience with Azure, migrating to Azure, all the services within Azure, the Azure ecosystem. I'm very, very good at that. And then I do some other weird stuff. Sometimes people like I just doing this with you just because I wanted to do it. I thought it'd be fun, but I get paid it's part of my consulting is just talking to people. So hey, come into our company and give a talk on, how analytics can be helpful in a company. I'm like, heck yeah, why not? And so I very, very eclectic. I build things, I consult on things, I do AI, the cloud, trainings, videos. I've done some internal videos for companies, which is really neat because someone is watching there and like, that's Alex the analyst. Why is he doing our internal training? I think it's funny. And so I just do a little bit of everything,
Love it. Thank you. Okay,
Yeah.
I know we have a few minutes here. We have 5 minutes. I'm going to try and go through some of the questions we missed, but
I'll try to be quick.
JU, I see you had a question a little bit earlier about data storytelling methods. Do you want to jump in if you're still on?
Hello. Hey, Alex. I just had a question. For your data storytelling efforts, since you've been involved with many different clients, you've been in many different industries, data literacy is half the battle, right? I mean, understanding the data, but how much of it is education based? I mean, are you teaching more before you get to the actual insights, or how does it all work when you're dealing with clients that are just first starting off, or maybe they're just getting their feet wet?
That's a good question. There's very, very differing approaches to this. And so I'm going to tell you my approach, and it has been very successful. But this is not like the golden goose here. What I do is I usually don't talk about the data that much. And I started figuring this out personally because I used to dive into the data. I was like, well, here's how we got the data. Here's how we cleaned it. I'm technical. I'm a very technical person. And so I like to dive really deep and like explain everything and how everything connects and, what we did. From my experience, nobody cares about that. Well, when you're presenting to, let's just say a manager, but when I was presenting to like the CFO of my Fortune 10 company, who's, 4 ranks above me, I found, because I had to present to him a lot, I found that he does not care about the data. What he cares about is what can we get out of the data? So I usually just start with, like the storytelling process, I start with, here's why we're here. And here's what we found. And do you have any questions? 9 times out of 10, they don't even care about the data. Even though you have to have the data and use the data to get to the conclusions and say, here's my recommendation, here's what we found. And there you go. Then they're going to come back with, well, how did you get that? Sometimes. And you say, well, here's how we got to this process. And you show them the slides. What I used to do, and I think this was always really funny, is I'd have 2 presentations ready. One was the presentation that was the layman terms, dumb it down, here's the nuts and bolts. Then I had the second presentation that was kind of the actual, what I would consider the data storytelling. Here's what the data is telling us. Here's what we found with this population, this A/B testing, or whatever, and here's the conclusion. And so I always actually usually had 2 presentations that I would give. During one presentation, they just didn't know it. But sometimes I would only get to that first presentation. They didn't care about anything else. They were just like, okay, that's perfect. How can we implement this? And I would say, here's how we implement it. Here's boom, 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 done. And so depends on what level, who you're talking to, but the higher you go, usually the less they care about the data storytelling and more about like the final result. And so that may not answer your question perfectly. Data storytelling is very important, but in the real world, from my experiences, they pay you and they hire you for you to take a lot of that, them having to understand it out of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm trying to use analogies, things that everyday people could understand. That way,
Sure.
it doesn't sound like you're using too much technical jargon. Because I learned that, I mean, you have to speak to the right audience, right?
Yeah.
So those are things that I kind of struggle with. But even having said that, how do you get your point across? I mean, those are things where, things like where you mentioned, okay, did not meet statistical significance. We need to iterate the process, and then it becomes
Yeah.
this mind-jarring process where, it's less about science, it's about picking opinions, right?
Yeah.
And picking what is their hypotheses and my validating their concerns. So that's the part where I just want to learn, like how do you iterate? Like how do you get them invigorated to iterate to a different process to develop a better hypothesis, if you will?
Right. Yes. Okay. So what you're talking about is very technical, like a lot of technical things that maybe the audience you're talking to doesn't fully understand or get. I guess what I was talking about was maybe not as technical, as more like there's this data storytelling generalized. But when you get crazy technical with an audience that doesn't know technical stuff, you lose them and you're gonna, they'll zone out very quickly. Almost like my YouTube channel, I try to keep things very simple. It is very similar to that. You're talking about statistical significance, maybe you're talking about retention rates or churn rates or things maybe they don't even know what those things are. Analogies are a good way to go. So I'm sure you're using some good analogies, and their analogies are really good to use. I think that when they aren't technical, use as little technical jargon as you possibly can. Just talk to them like you're talking to like your niece or your nephew or your son or something. Like, hey, we tried to validate it this way. We tried to see if it was good this way. It didn't work. But we're going to go back and we're going to do this. And keep it, I don't, it's again, it's very, very dependent on who you're talking to or what you're doing, but I would just keep it as simple as humanly possible without even mentioning technical words at all. Just like natural human conversation level terms.
Awesome. Well, I know we're a minute over here, but I just want to say thank you all so much for all the amazing questions, and huge thank you to you, Alex, for taking the time to join us today and share your experience. One question I thought we could just end on is just knowing, what are you most excited about in the year ahead?
In 2024 or into 2025?
Whichever one you want.
Okay. And this is gonna sound really weird, but from my perspective, it doesn't sound weird because it just doesn't. I'm very excited about the fact that as we, and this is going to be on AI because I've just been really into it. As we get more into AI, we start seeing its limitations. And I think that's a very good thing. And the more I talk to companies and consult with them, and the more I talk to, and going into the end of this year, I have more coming up. I get very excited about actually using AI in a useful way instead of using general AI to try to use for a specific task that's not good at and then getting bad results. So I'm really excited about the educational piece of companies and people learning more about the limitations and the good parts of AI. That's what I'm excited about.
I love it. Thank you so much. And thank you all.
Absolutely.
I put this into the chat, but I just want to say thank you so much to people who filled out the Hangout survey. All of your insights there are so valuable to me. If you have feedback for me on how we can make these sessions better for you, if you just have any general feedback or just want to say that you love them, I would really appreciate that. And I put the form there in the chat. Have a great rest of the day, everybody.